Stepmom took only my dad and her kids on a vacation while I was in hospital because she thought silly me would stay there on my own without any complaints. I left the hospital and went to live with my mom, and now stepmom and dad are in big trouble and want me to lie to the authorities, but I straight up refused. I hate my stepmom, Karen. She's one of the most frustrating, controlling, and inconsiderate people I have ever known. Ever since she married my dad, my life has been turned upside down. For context, my parents divorced 3 years ago. Dad and mom just never got along and would fight frequently. When my parents announced their divorce, I wasn't much surprised. My dad and mom were never a great match from the start, honestly. They tried to make it work, but there was always tension between them, especially when it came to responsibilities around the house. Although my dad technically stayed at home, he didn't enjoy any of the typical household duties that often come with that role. Cooking, cleaning, or even helping me with homework were not really his priorities, and he made no secret of his dislike for doing those things. Instead, he liked to spend a huge chunk of his time on his phone trying to build an online following. He considered himself a fitness influencer, always recording or posting something even though his follower count wasn't exactly impressive. When he wasn't glued to his phone, he spent much of his time and a significant portion of my mom's income going out with his friends. Shopping sprees, brunches, or beauty treatments, those were his regular activities. He never really fit the mold of what most people think of as a typical dad. While other parents generally check on their kids' assignments, making sure they are keeping up with their studies and asking about their daily lives, my dad's primary concern was to only look after himself. He constantly stressed about his appearance and also expected me to stay thin at all times and put together. It was almost as if he saw me more as a reflection of his own image than as an individual with my own needs. Anyways, after the divorce, both my parents got custody of me, and my time was split between them. Initially, it took me some time to adapt to living between two separate households, and just as I was starting to settle in, my dad met Karen. He seemed smitten by her from the very first date. In just a few days, they started to officially date, and after a few weeks, Dad made me meet her. Suddenly, this stranger was everywhere, and I was expected to welcome her into our lives with open arms. Now, I wouldn't have had any problem accepting Karen if she were a decent person, but the reality is she's not. Right from the beginning, Karen had these unrealistic expectations. He assumed I would just happily accept her as my new mom, even though she was, in my eyes, a total downgrade from my actual mother. She constantly meddles in my life and seems to seize every opportunity to belittle me. It feels like no matter what I do, she finds a way to criticize or control me. For instance, she has 2 daughters, and she becomes visibly annoyed with me whenever she thinks I'm acting too boyish, as she likes to phrase it. She has outright told me that I shouldn't wear tank tops or baggy jeans, as if how I dress is any of her business. She also insists that I shouldn't leave my hair messy and expects me to keep my short hair neatly combed at all times. It doesn't stop there. If I ever have friends over, she always interrupts us, claiming she's just checking in. But it's not just a quick hello or a casual inquiry. She literally barges in and hovers around as if she doesn't trust me and my friends to be alone. It's incredibly intrusive, and, honestly, it's humiliating. When I protest or ask her to leave us alone, she brushes it off, saying things like, "Boys require constant supervision, and we should just pretend like she's not even here." It's infuriating that she doesn't extend the same level of interference to her daughters or seems to feel the need to constantly oversee their every move. When I try to bring up how much this bothers me with my dad, hoping for support or understanding, he brushes it off. He tells me she's just being protective, as though that excuses her behavior. On top of everything, Karen's 2 daughters make my life even harder. They have no concept of personal space, and their personalities clash with mine in every possible way. They are also relentless when it comes to bullying me, whether it's teasing, mocking, or finding new ways to make me feel small. They pick on me constantly. And instead of stepping in, my dad dismisses their behavior by saying, "That's how all siblings bond." When my dad decided to marry Karen after just a year of dating, he expected me to just fall in line. He told me in no uncertain terms that he loved Karen and was determined to make their marriage work. He knew I had doubts and frustrations, but he was clear about what he wanted from me, to give Karen a chance and not to make things difficult for him. He urged me to accept her as part of our family. It felt like a lot to ask, especially given how fast everything was happening. But I wanted to support him and keep the peace, so I agreed to try. Since then, I've genuinely made an effort to accept Karen and her daughters. I've tried to go along with her routines and adapt to the changes, even though it's been far from easy. One of the things that bothers me most is how Karen insists that I call her mom. It doesn't feel right, and every time I say it, I can't help but feel resentment building up inside me. I already have a mom, and I don't want to replace her. Yet Karen doesn't seem to understand or care that it's hard for me. But beyond the name, what's really painful is the shift in my dad's attention and priorities. After his marriage, He seems more focused on Karen's daughters than on me. He spends more time with them, helps them with things he never did for me, and acts more like a father to them than he ever has with me. I sometimes feel like I've lost my place in his life. He is only ever a dad to Karen's daughters. Now, I'd love to live with my mom, especially since she is generally more understanding, but she had to move away once she got a new job in another city that paid her significantly better. She still visits me from time to time, but I stay with Dad full time. Mom and I also talk on the phone regularly. She knows about some of the issues I have with Karen and her daughters because I've opened up to her about it. She's really supportive and has even tried to talk to my dad about the situation. I think she genuinely wants to help. But every time she brings it up, my dad shuts her down. He tells her to back off and insists that she shouldn't interfere in his marriage. Over the years, I've done my best, despite everything, to adjust to life with my new family. I've really tried to make an effort with Karen and her daughters, hoping that if I stayed patient and open, we could build some kind of positive relationship. But despite my efforts, I still feel invisible in my family. This year, Karen unexpectedly received a promotion at work. When she came home, she proudly announced that she'd be treating all of us to a family trip. The news had us all excited, especially since it had been so long since we'd gone on a vacation together. She and Dad picked the place and booked tickets and accommodations for all of us. But as luck would have it, just a day before our trip, I got into a car accident with my dad. We were driving home after shopping for a few outfits for the upcoming vacation when, out of nowhere, another car slammed into us from behind. It wasn't a massive collision, but it was enough to throw us off and cause some injuries. My dad was mostly okay aside from a few scrapes and bruises here and there, but I wasn't so lucky. I ended up with a broken arm and a concussion from the impact. The ambulance was called, and before I knew it, I was being admitted to the hospital. When Karen first heard about our accident, she rushed to the hospital looking concerned. At first, I thought she was genuinely worried about me and my dad, that she was showing up because she cared about our well-being. But then she kept bringing up the trip, obsessing over whether or not we'd still be able to go and worrying that the money she'd spent would go to waste. The doctors eventually informed us that due to my concussion, I'd need to stay in the hospital for a few days for observation. They wanted to make sure I was okay before clearing me to go home, but travel was definitely off the table for me. Karen looked at me frustrated, as if it was my fault for getting into the accident and wasting her money. Since I had to stay in the hospital, my dad half-heartedly offered to stay back with me. It gave me a glimmer of hope that he'd choose to support me during such a difficult time. However, Karen was quick to jump in, arguing that since our plane tickets were already paid for, we were already losing money with me not going and that it wouldn't make sense for my dad to also waste even more money by staying behind. She then turned to me and told me that at my age, I should be perfectly capable of staying at the hospital alone for a few days. She pointed out how safe the hospital was with doctors and nurses on call 24/7, implying that I had nothing to worry about. Karen then went on to insist that once I was discharged, she'd arrange for a babysitter to stay with me at home. I argued with her that I wasn't comfortable staying at the hospital alone or having a babysitter take care of me back home. I begged my dad to stay with me instead. My dad did try to stand up for me, telling Karen that it wasn't right to just leave me alone in the hospital. He knew that this was wrong. However, Karen still pushed back. She kept arguing that my dad's presence was unnecessary and that his staying would only mean sitting by my side and doing nothing productive the whole day. She made it sound as though his presence was useless, ignoring the emotional support he could actually provide. For her, not wasting her vacation money was more important than anything else. Clearly, she didn't see me as her real child, so she just didn't care about how I felt or what happened to me. I tried to plead that, at 15, I shouldn't be left alone in the hospital. I was scared and in pain, and the idea of going through all of this without any family member around was overwhelming. I suggested a compromise, saying that maybe Dad could call my mom to come down and stay with me while he and Karen would be gone. Sure, it would take a little time for her to get here since she lives in another city, but I was confident she'd come in a heartbeat if she knew I was hospitalized. I thought this could be a way for them to still go on their trip while making sure I wasn't alone. But Karen shot the idea down almost immediately. She dismissed my concern, saying I was being silly and making a big deal out of minor injuries. She brushed off my suggestion of calling my mom, claiming it would only make her worry unnecessarily. According to Karen, there was no need to disrupt anyone else's plans over something as trivial as a concussion and a broken arm, injuries that would heal just fine with a few days of hospital rest. In the end, Karen's pressure worked. I looked at my dad hoping he'd stand his ground and insist on staying with me. But as usual, he gave in to Karen. Rather than fighting for what I needed, he agreed to leave. He stayed with me for only a single night, which brought me some comfort. I clung to the hope that maybe after seeing how vulnerable I felt, he would realize I needed him there. But the next day, Karen showed up at the hospital to pick him up, eager to head off on the trip as planned without any consideration for how I was doing. After my dad left me alone at the hospital, I felt abandoned and betrayed. After just a day of being there by myself, I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. One of the nurses noticed me crying, and after realizing that I didn't have anyone around to check on me, she kindly offered to call my dad. I told her it was fine, that they probably wouldn't answer anyway, but she insisted, so I gave her my mom's number. I was half expecting that my mom might scold me or tell me, just like my stepmom had, that I was overreacting and that being alone in the hospital wasn't a big deal. But the moment my mom picked up the phone and was informed by the nurse about my situation, she was immediately concerned. She sounded more worried than I'd heard her in a long time and asked me if my dad had really gone off on the trip without me. I explained the whole situation, telling her how Karen had insisted it was fine to leave me because she didn't want the trip money to go to waste and how Dad had ultimately agreed to go along with it. My mom was furious. As I told her everything, she went quiet, but I could feel her anger simmering. She then told me that my dad had only mentioned we'd been in a minor fender bender, downplaying the entire situation. He hadn't mentioned a single word about my broken arm or my concussion, or that he and Karen would be leaving me alone in the hospital. According to what he told her, there was nothing to worry about, so she hadn't felt the need to reach out to me. Hearing that Dad had knowingly lied about my situation to Mom made me feel even more hurt and betrayed. My mom immediately assured me that she was going to come over as soon as possible. She told me she'd drop everything and drive over to the hospital and stay with me no matter how long it would take. For the first time since I'd been admitted, I felt a sense of relief, knowing that my mom was coming to be by my side and that finally, someone was taking my situation seriously. And as I sat there waiting, I realized just how much I needed that kind of support in my life. Within just 2 hours, my mom arrived at the hospital, and seeing her walk through the door felt like a huge weight had lifted off my chest. I started to cry as she hugged me and reassured me that everything was going to be okay. She then immediately went to speak with my doctors, making sure she understood every detail of my injuries. I could see the relief on her face when she confirmed that, while my injuries were painful and serious, they weren't life-threatening. She was very regretful for not being there for me sooner and for not questioning my dad's version of events. She told me she regretted trusting that everything was fine without checking in on me directly, and it was clear that she was beating herself up over it. Obviously, my mom's anger toward Karen was palpable. She was furious that my stepmom had the audacity to treat my needs so casually and then chose to go on a trip rather than ensuring I was taken care of. The lack of respect and care Karen showed by leaving me to manage alone in the hospital revealed just how little I mattered to her. Her actions spoke volumes, making it clear that despite being in a relationship with my dad, I was nothing more than an inconvenience to her. My mom tried to call Dad and Karen, but neither of them picked up her calls. This made Mom even more furious, and she swore up and down that she was going to teach Dad and Karen a lesson for abandoning me like this. Over the next 2 nights, my mom stayed right by my side, having taken leave from work to make sure I wouldn't be alone. She didn't leave me for a moment until I was finally discharged. And even then, she wasn't comfortable with me going back to Karen's house, where I'd be left with just a babysitter until everyone returned. Instead, she insisted I come home with her, so I agreed. Once I settled in at my mom's place, she tried reaching out to Dad again. He claimed he had missed her earlier calls because he was having so much fun with Karen and her daughters. Hearing this only fueled her anger more, and she didn't hold back. She firmly told him that his behavior was unacceptable, that abandoning me in the hospital was a serious act of neglect, and that she planned to take legal action to hold him and Karen accountable. She even mentioned taking him to court if necessary so he could even lose custody of me, making it clear that she was prepared to report both him and Karen for their actions. Since then, my phone has been constantly buzzing with calls and texts from both Karen and my dad. Instead of acknowledging what they did or expressing any sort of apology, they've been sending message after message accusing me of ruining their vacation by telling my mom about my situation. Karen has even gone as far as to say that all I had to do was keep my mouth shut and quietly stay in the hospital without making a fuss. According to them, everything would have been fine if I had just complied with them. Am I the asshole for throwing my dad and stepmom under the bus? Update 1. For everyone asking, now that I've had some time to think about it and have talked to my mom, I realized that there have been so many times over the years that Karen and Dad neglected me, and I just let it happen. I stayed quiet hoping things would change, but they never did. It's hard to admit, but I allowed myself to be pushed aside for their convenience. And now looking back, I can't believe I tolerated it for so long. For example, Karen frequently undermined my relationship with my mom. She would constantly make negative comments about her, saying things like she was a deadbeat or a loser compared to her. This was because Karen strongly believed my mom wasn't a good wife to my dad, and hence she had the right to bash on my mom. Dad also never asks her to stop. Whenever I have had issues at home or tried to talk to Dad about them, Karen always dismisses my feelings by telling me that I make a big deal out of things or that I'm just too sensitive because I'm a boy. She often claims that this is why she's so lucky to have only daughters. Karen constantly shows favoritism toward her daughters even in the smallest day-to-day interactions. She doesn't mind giving them money for any expense they have without hesitation. But whenever I ask Dad for anything, Karen interrogates me with countless questions. She constantly claims that I'm buying unnecessary things and wasting money even though it's not even the money that I spend to begin with. It's my mom's money, so I'm allowed to spend it however I want. Despite being in the same house, we never spent quality time together as a family. Karen and Dad would often make plans with her daughters and leave me out, claiming they didn't want to bother me or that they wanted to spend some quality time together without me. This often left me feeling abandoned and unimportant. They would go out for dinner or do things that they enjoyed without considering that I might want to be included. This is probably why I was so excited to join them on the vacation because they rarely ever included me in their plans. Karen and Dad also don't like to celebrate my birthdays. They always tell me that since Karen's daughters don't make a big deal out of their birthdays, I shouldn't expect much either. It's like they believe I don't deserve any special attention just because it's not their way. And when it comes to gifts, I end up getting things that I don't even like or use as if they don't care enough to put any thought into what I would actually enjoy. Whenever I was struggling with school, Karen would say things like, "You're just lazy. That's your problem." Or "Why do you even bother with that stuff?" Instead of asking what was going on or offering help, she made it about how it inconvenienced her. Dad, on the other hand, would just stay silent, not offering any comfort or words of encouragement, even though he knew how much it was affecting me. Update 2. So my mom did report Dad and Stepmom to CPS. It wasn't a decision she made lightly, but she felt it was necessary to ensure that what had happened wasn't overlooked. She couldn't just sit back and let them treat me like that, leaving me behind in the hospital without a second thought. When Karen and my dad returned home, they were contacted by CPS officials. They had to answer a whole bunch of questions explaining the situation, their actions, and their decision. I'm sure it was a wake-up call for them, one they probably weren't expecting. But the authorities agreed with my mom that leaving me behind in the hospital, especially after being injured, was unacceptable. They acknowledged that I had been neglected in a way that put my well-being at risk. Later, my dad called me. He wasn't exactly happy, and I could tell from his tone that he was upset with me. He told me that I had pushed both him and Karen into a lot of trouble by involving CPS. It felt like he was blaming me for what happened, but I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. He warned me that CPS would be reaching out to me next to get my side of the story. My dad then continued to strongly urge me to lie to the authorities, telling me that if I didn't, then I could end up being taken away from him and he would lose custody of me. I argued with him that I wasn't comfortable lying to the authorities and that maybe he should face the consequences of his actions when he abandoned me at the hospital that day. Dad then tried to guilt-trip me, saying things like how he had given me years of his life and that I needed to show my loyalty to him this time. He made it sound like I was somehow going to betray him by being honest with the authorities as if I was the one at fault for everything that happened. But what really struck me was when he told me that lying would also protect Karen and her daughters. He explained that the CPS investigation could end up causing problems for Karen, especially with her ex-husband. Her ex-husband might find out and use this as ammunition to make Karen pay for it. I just shook my head as I realized how my dad seemed more concerned about my stepmom's reputation and his own than about what I had been through. Not once did he ask me how I was doing or if I had recovered. Meanwhile, he continued to beg me, pleading with me to lie and protect his family. I couldn't take his selfishness anymore. I stood my ground and told him in no uncertain terms that I didn't care how this would affect him and Karen, but I would not be lying to the authorities. I told him that I would be telling them exactly what had happened, and I wouldn't be covering up anything for anyone. If this meant he and Karen were in trouble, then so be it. They were the adults here. They were the ones who had messed up, so I wasn't going to protect them from the consequences of their actions. My dad yelled at me some more and called me names, but I didn't give in. Ever since then, I feel guilty. However, I think I'm doing the right thing. Update 3. It's been almost 2 weeks since my last update. I have talked to the authorities and told them the truth. For now, I will be staying with my mom. My mom has been looking into school so I can stay with her here permanently. I have to say that it feels nice to live with her. Dad has continued to try to guilt-trip me, but there's nothing else that he can do for now. He has been given a warning by CPS. Dad clearly neglected his responsibility to me, and that could not be ignored. CPS has asked him to make significant changes, like attending mandatory parenting classes and counseling to address his issues with neglect and his relationship with me. Karen was also scrutinized as she had shown a lack of respect and care for me, especially during the hospital incident. CPS made it clear that they would be closely monitoring the situation if and whenever I came over to stay with them and that any further neglect or mistreatment would lead to more serious consequences. Update 4. Wow. Can't believe that it's been almost 4 months now since I have been living with my mom. I feel like I'm finally in a place where I'm not constantly walking on eggshells or doubting my worth. Living with my mom has been such a huge relief. She's supportive, listens to me, and most importantly, she respects my space and my decisions. It's been a complete 180 compared to what I was dealing with before. I feel heard here. I can talk about my day, my struggles, my dreams, and she actually cares. I've been able to focus more on school and my mental health, and I feel like I'm finally getting back to who I really am. I've also made some amazing new friends at school and I genuinely love spending time with them. In fact, last month, for the first time in a long time, I actually got to have a proper birthday celebration. I invited all my friends over, and we had a pizza party while watching cheesy action movies. It was the kind of birthday I'd always wanted but never got when I lived with my dad and Karen. As for Dad, things are still complicated. He's been trying to contact me more frequently lately, even sending me texts about how sorry he is and how much he misses me. Part of me feels guilty for staying away, but then I remember everything that led to this point. I've made it clear to him that I'm still not ready to come back. And while he tries to reach out, I've established boundaries for myself. His actions were damaging, and he needs to take full responsibility for that. As for Karen, she hasn't apologized or taken any responsibility for her actions. Honestly, I'm not surprised. She's never shown any real concern for me or my well-being. The way she treated me, especially when I was in the hospital, is something I'll never forget. Whether she ever changes or not doesn't matter to me anymore. I'm not waiting around to find out. I've learned to rely on myself and the people who truly care about me, and that's enough.